Good evening, Rowan. It's the 2nd of October 2016 and it's about 11:30 in the evening. And obviously I'm making you my usual Sunday evening video to reassure you I haven't been seducing any priests over the weekend. Not even my beloved, even though he's so gorgeous and handsome and so hard to resist, being nothing like you at all. So I thought we could carry on our little chat this evening about your lecture at St Martin in the Fields on the 19th of September 2016 when you thought I was going to be in the audience. Well, there is a little bit more I could have said about the lecture, but I've now moved on to the question and answer session. So here you are talking about the Brexit vote in response to a question, and I'm going to play the question in the clip I'm going to play later on. So someone's asked you about the Brexit vote, and you say, I found myself, like so many others, feeling rather stunned the morning after the referendum, and wondering where we were going and what country I now lived in. Well, let me help you answer that question about what country you now live in, Rowan. You live in Narnia. Because you live in a total fantasy world, and virtually everything you see is a manifestation of the complete and utter fantasy world that you live in, and the fact that you can't tell the difference between fantasy and reality, and you're continually trying to make your environment and other people conform to your fantasies about how things should be and how other people should be and how they should all think you're wonderful and give you what you want. So anyway, you go on to say, the fact is, of course, you seldom talk about any facts. I did ask you quite a few times in videos, present some facts to refute what I'm saying. So you're now saying that things are facts, but I'm not sure they actually are facts. You're just saying that they're facts to make them seem more believable, I suppose. So you say, the fact is, of course, that whatever we say in this overblown opinion poll called a referendum. Right, so I want to talk about that now. So you're very disparaging about the views of the British people, which you're referring to this Brexit referendum as an overblown opinion poll. And in fact, you are on video at the London School of Economics, and I have played this video clip before as well, saying that because of climate change, meaning this global warming hoax that's intended to bring in a dictatorial one world government and depopulate the earth. You're on video at the London School of Economics saying that we're going to have to think very hard about what democracy means in response to the environmental crisis. So you're not interested in the opinions of the riffraff, and by making a statement like this, you're actually demonstrating what I've said all along, that you think you're superior to other people, and you have narcissistic delusions. In fact, it's you who's off in cloud cuckoo land and doesn't know what you're talking about and talks shit all of the time and is trying to manipulate everybody, not only to give you what you want, but also to go along with a certain political agenda towards the New World Order, and everything you say goes in that direction, whether it's your pseudo-theology or your pseudo-concern for the poor, people in the third world, women, gay people, the environment, whoever it is, refugees as well at the moment, and also you haven't realised that you're living in Narnia in relation to the Brexit vote. So that's where you're living, in Narnia. And you've just shown your contempt of the British people by describing a referendum as an overblown opinion poll. Your contemptuous attitude towards your fellow human beings. And this is the kind of person that you are. You're a revolting little man. So you say, the fact is, of course, that whatever we say in this overblown opinion poll called a referendum, we are actually involved with one another in ways that are not going to be torn up quickly. Right, so, well, people in Europe, like in different countries of Europe, are involved with each other in business and more personal areas, and also religiously, and in quite a lot of areas people are involved in each other, but that's not the same, is it, as having to have a Stalinist bureaucracy in Brussels dictating to us what to do, because you can't seem to get it through that demented thick skull of yours that we haven't actually left Europe. We've left the European Union. Now, the European Union and Europe are different things. And I did explain all of this before in July, because you'd made a speech at York University when you were conferred an honorary degree, saying something about our continent, and then you said something like, and I say our continent advisedly, or something like that. I'm playing the clip of that later in the video as well, because you don't seem to understand the difference between Europe and the European Union. You're as mad as a hatter, quite honestly. We are actually involved with one another in ways that are not going to be torn up quickly. So, well, you thought I was in the audience, so I'd just like to point out again that you and I are not actually involved with each other at all, and we never will be, and we never have been, so bear that in mind as well. So you then say, we need as citizens and as Christians to be clear about those ongoing involvements that are not going to be destroyed just by a vote. So, well, I don't think anybody I don't think anybody thinks that connections between businesses and governments and individuals and organisations in Europe, between Britain and other countries in Europe, are going to be dissolved because of a vote. As I've said, we voted to leave the European Union and not to leave Europe. And we couldn't vote to leave Europe anyway, because it's kind of a big landmass that we're stuck onto. You know, it's only very shallow water in the English Channel. So we can't actually vote to leave Europe. We're not going anywhere. I just don't know how anybody can be so dumb. I really don't know how anyone can be so dumb. So then you say, we need, I think, to go on putting whatever resources we can into the rather unpromising public discussion at the moment about what this is all going to mean. Because one of the things that drives me to distraction about the whole story is being invited to make a major decision about national policy with no policy. So to say yes or no to. Well, if our policy is leaving the European Union, then that's going to take some working out of the details of it. And we haven't actually left yet, have we? All these details are being worked out. But there would have been no point working them out in advance, would there? Because people might have voted to stay in the European Union. So doing lots of endless work for no particular reason isn't a good idea, really. So the policy is that we want to leave the European Union, and that's how the majority of British people voted. So that's what we're going to do. And so any policies and so on can be worked out. And I would point out that for most of British history, a lot of things have happened in British history. The majority of things have happened in British history without Britain being a member of the European Union. We haven't been in the European Union for all that long. I mean, we weren't in it when I was born, for a start. And I know I'm getting on a bit, but I'm not that old. So somehow I managed to be born in Britain, and nothing had gone to rack and ruin simply because we weren't in the European Union. And in fact, the European Union, as it is now, didn't even exist then. So there you are. It's a relatively recent thing, only since the early 90s, the European Union in its present form. So it's not really even 25 yet, is it? So get a grip, will you? And look at the Eurozone crisis. And look at the Greek economy. There's just economies collapsing all over Europe. It's a total disaster. You're as mad as a hatter. And of course, the whole idea was dreamed up. I mean, Hitler wanted it. It was a plan of Hitler. And then it was all agreed that this was going to happen at the Bilderberg Group in the early 50s. And that's all on record. You know, it's written down. It's not a conspiracy theory. We've got the documents. So then you go on to say, and I still can't believe that we allowed that to happen. I don't know who we is there. Do you mean the whole nation? You're speaking on behalf of us all, aren't you? Because we're the collective, and you've got the authority to speak for us all. So, I've lost my place now. Oh dear. So we do have some things to play for in this. But just to come back to the very start of the question, changing the story. All right, I'll be indiscreet. Just as in the last election campaign, the opposition wholly bought into a story of financial irresponsibility on the part of Gordon Brown's government and never challenged it. And you're talking now, you're using this oratory style that I've mentioned before, where you're raising your voice an octave at the end of statements to make yourself sound more authoritative. Well, I don't know if people did buy into the idea that Gordon Brown's government was being irresponsible, and Gordon Brown wasn't actually Prime Minister for very long, was it? Because Tony Blair wouldn't piss off. So I really don't think you could blame Gordon Brown for anything. Really. I mean, apart from the fact we could thank Gordon Brown for the fact that we never got in the Euro, despite the fact that Tony Blair was trying to manipulate him into joining the Euro, into getting Britain in the Euro by saying that he was going to step aside and let Gordon Brown become Prime Minister if only Gordon Brown, who was Chancellor of the Exchequer, would get Britain into the Euro. Claire Short is actually on YouTube in an interview talking about that, and she told this to Gordon Brown, and Gordon Brown said that she wasn't the first person who told him that. It wasn't a good reason for getting Britain into the Euro zone, and also there was no guarantee that Tony Blair would keep his word even if he did that anyway. I think a lot of what went on in Britain was actually the responsibility of Tony Blair, who's another globalist puppet like you, and who appointed you as Archbishop of Canterbury, the first Archbishop of Canterbury to be appointed from outside of England since 1414, which was before the Reformation, and you were appointed from Wales. And the church in Wales was actually part of the Church of England until 1920. So even after the Reformation, up until 1920, there was no Archbishop of Canterbury appointed from Wales, even though Wales was part of the Church of England then, the church in Wales. So it's a very unusual thing. And I think it took another globalist puppet, Tony Blair, your friend, who you were pretending to be rivals with on the public scene, but you're both batting on the same side. So I don't really, I don't really know why you're mentioning Gordon Brown's government when he wasn't even the Prime Minister for very long at all. And you're doing this octave raise strategy as well, so I'm playing that clip later on so you can see that. So you say this happened that the opposition wholly bought into a story of financial irresponsibility on the part of Gordon Brown's government and never challenged it. So in the referendum campaign, everybody bought into the story of Europe being a problem. Well, no one bought into the story of Europe being a problem. Maybe everybody or most people bought into the story of the European Union being a problem, and maybe the reason for that is that the European Union is a problem. It's a big problem, not only for the people of Europe, but for people over the entire world, since it's part of the strategy of the New World Order. So you then say the result was Europe was a problem. We had some argument which said in effect, well, it'll be an even worse problem if we come out, but there was a great void in making a sort of moral cause, a visionary case for Europe. So it's quite hysterical hearing you talking about a moral cause anyway. You're just virtue signalling because you're not even immoral, you're amoral. You don't have any morals at all. You're utterly unscrupulous, and the only purpose of any of your actions or opinions is to manipulate the outcome you want, both for yourself and for your globalist puppet masters. So don't even mention the word moral. You're not even remotely plausible. And also, this is obviously in the lecture where you're threatening to kill me if I don't have sex with you. Well, just imagine I actually been at that lecture and I'd been so terrified that you were going to kill me that I agreed to have sex with you. Well, that's rape, isn't it? So you've got the character of a rapist and you're lecturing the British people and referring to a referendum as an overblown opinion poll, which just shows your absolute astonishing arrogance. And here you are talking as if you're the moral person with the moral vision, and the British people are all a bunch of idiots who don't know what to think or do about anything. So you then say, and I've recently been reading a collection of essays by French philosophers and theologians, a very, very good volume on Europe. And I wrote to the editor to say, as a friend, to say, if only we'd had something like that in our debate, simply to say, Europe is not a burden, a problem, an embarrassment. It's at least potentially something of moral significance and moral scope that we ought to be able to work with creatively, affirmingly. But we didn't hear that. And you sound like you're very hard done by because you didn't hear all of this flannel in the debate. Well, I've already mentioned that we're not talking about Europe or Europeans. We're talking about the European Union. And for some reason, a genius like you doesn't seem able to grasp the difference between the two things. And I really don't know why reading French philosophy. You haven't even said what this book is or who the philosophers and theologians are. So we can't even check what they're saying because we don't know anything about it. You could well be making it up like you make everything else up. So I'm not too sure why reading French philosophers and theologians is going to help the general public make a decision as to whether they want Britain to be in the European Union or not. I think you're just muddying the waters, really, because what we need to be thinking about is the world takeover bit by the globalists and the fact that the European Union is part of that, and you're a puppet on a string saying whatever they've told you to say. So really, nothing at all that you say has any credibility in the political realm because you're heading everybody off towards the New World Order. Anyway, I'm going to play that clip now, and I'm going to make another comment in a minute.
Rowan, you talk about trying to change the story. What about the story that we've just lived through in this country with the referendum, where many people feel the church didn't speak out at all because they were scared of sort of getting involved in interfering in democracy. And yet it's left many people feeling profoundly uncertain what the Christian should be doing towards the neighbour that has, for example, made this city work for so many years and made this city the city of creativity, energy, and wonderful place it is.
Mm. Yes, I found myself, like so many others, feeling rather stunned the morning after the referendum and wondering where we were going and what country I now lived in. The fact is, of course, that whatever we say in this overblown opinion poll called a referendum, we are actually involved with one another in ways that are not going to be torn up quickly. We need, as citizens and as Christians, to be clear about those ongoing involvements that are not going to be destroyed just by a vote. We need, I think, to go on putting whatever resources we can into the rather unpromising public discussion at the moment about what all this is going to mean. Because one of the things that drives me to distraction about the whole story is being invited to make a major decision about national policy with no policy to say yes or no to. And that I still can't believe that we allowed that to happen. So we do have some things to play for in this. But just to come back to the very start of the question, changing the story. All right, I'll be indiscreet. Just as in the last election campaign, the opposition wholly bought into a story of financial irresponsibility on the part of Gordon Brown's government and never challenged it. So in the referendum campaign, everybody bought into the story of Europe being a problem. The result was Europe was a problem. We had some argument that said, in effect, well, it'll be an even worse problem if we come out. But there was a great void in making a sort of moral case, a visionary case for Europe. And I've recently been reading a collection of essays by French philosophers and theologians, a very, very good volume on Europe. And I wrote to the editor to say, as a friend, to say, if only we'd had something like that in our debate, simply to say Europe is not a burden, a problem, an embarrassment. It's at least potentially something of moral significance and moral scope that we ought to be able to work with creatively, affirmingly. And we didn't hear that.
Right, so someone follows on then with a question about nationalism, the rise of nationalism. So you say, being a little frivolous for a moment, I think we need another compendium word to describe the American and the European situation and what I'd like to call the Brumpet phenomenon. So I suppose that's got something to do with Brexit and Donald Trump. You like making words up anyway, don't you? Obviously, the million words in common use in English just aren't enough for you, so you have to invent other words to express your sophisticated thinking and also redefine existing words, like heresy, for example, which you redefined as meaning that anyone who leaves the Church of England to become a Catholic is a heretic. So you then say, the worldwide regression into self-regarding, angry scapegoating mode. This is the Brumpet phenomenon that you're talking about. So you consider that all the people who voted to leave the European Union, who want to vote for Donald Trump in America, are self-regarding, angry and scapegoating. Well, this is what you say about anybody who doesn't give you what you want and who doesn't do the things that you want and won't think in the way that you want them to think. So anyone who disagrees with you and won't give you what you want is morally, spiritually and intellectually inferior and takes part in overblown opinion polls. So you're just once again showing your extreme narcissism and your exceptionally arrogant attitude. So then you say, well, we've had a very insecure few years as a globe. Apart from those parts of the world where it really is a matter of daily threats to life, you raise your voice an octave there again. We've had terrorism combined with financial insecurity, the great financial crisis. We haven't actually got over that. A lot of people feel profoundly alienated from the so-called democratic process. So people who want a more nationalistic approach in politics rather than a globalist approach have something wrong with them. And they're only believing these things or acting in this way because they're emotionally disturbed in some way. Because we all ought to be one happy global village, singing Kumbaya and not worrying about what the globalist banksters are doing to try and eliminate us all and all their useful idiots like you. And of course you're a terrorist, aren't you? And you thought I was going to turn up and arrest you for terrorism at this event. So then you say, and when you look at the American election, you can see why. The best democracy money can buy, as somebody once said. Yes, well, you're the best archbishop anyone could buy, aren't you? So I'm not sure you should be saying anything about American democracy being the best that money can buy, because what's the saying about people in glass houses not throwing stones? And who's buying it as well? Of course, it's the globalist banksters who are controlling you through handlers in the intelligence agencies. So you then say, and a general sort of global sense of leadership alienated from citizenry and so forth. Well, the real question is, why do we even need any leadership? You're always going on about leaders, and you said in Thought for the day after the London hoax bombings, which you were also providing propaganda for, that the G7 was meeting in Gleneagles and people wanted to be proud of their leaders. You're just completely mad. I don't know who thinks like that. Criticising the government is a national pastime in Britain, so I really don't know who on earth was sitting there thinking, I want to be proud of my leaders, because I've never come across anyone like that in my whole life. And of course you think that you are one of the leaders, don't you? So you're not sitting there wanting to be proud of the leaders either, are you? You consider yourself to be a cut above everybody else. That's why you can make statements like a referendum is an overblown opinion poll. And then you say, I'm not entirely surprised that people reach for the first thing on the peg, which is the comforting conviction it's their fault. And the they is the political class, the chattering class, the migrant, the banker, the welfare scrounger. You know, you just scattergun blame going out in all directions from those who feel most alienated or left behind. So that doesn't actually make any sense, really, altogether, but I won't go into that now. So the fact is that the banksters have engineered all these things, haven't they, really? They engineered communism. They engineered the Third Reich. They engineered the European Union, they've engineered the United Nations and the World Council of Churches, they've engineered globalist wars to further their aims. This is all on record, by the way, and they've written down the United Nations Agenda 21, which is the blueprint for global dictatorship. And the control by a global government of every aspect of people's lives. And that isn't a conspiracy theory. I mean, they've written it down and anyone can buy it and read it. So to say that the bankers are responsible for this is actually true, isn't it? Because you don't understand that scapegoat means blaming someone for something, blaming an innocent person, whereas blaming a guilty person isn't scapegoating. You've accused me of scapegoating you in the past, when in fact you're scapegoating me, simply because I won't do what you want. So you then say, and I was talking to someone earlier this evening about the strange fact, that in South Wales, my own home, an area which has benefited enormously from European grants over the years, whose life has been saved, you might say, by European grants, is one of the areas of the country that voted most strongly to leave the Union. So let's just imagine this existing system then. So British people pay taxes. The government controls the money that British people pay in taxes, and some of that goes to the European Union, and then a lot of that is siphoned off by bureaucracy and paying career politicians who've been put out to pasture by national governments, and they then go and work in the European Parliament, and who knows what they all do over there. And then these other people in Brussels, who are not in the best place to know about the situation in South Wales or any other part of Britain, then decide where they're going to send grants from the money that the British people have paid them already, and obviously people from other member states. So leaving the European Union means, even if everything else stayed the same, that all that money that would go to the European Union, well, why couldn't the British government just distribute that and give grants to people in South Wales? Why couldn't the British government do that then? Why does the European Union need to do it? This is what I mean. You've got no sense. You're unable to think critically, and you're absolutely obsessed with pushing forward a certain political agenda, even in the face of all the evidence. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous to imagine that Britain is getting anything from the European Union. It's costed us a lot of money, and it costs other member states a lot of money as well. Well, why can't the member states just keep their money and distribute it as they want, even if all the rest of the things in terms of national governments and taxation and so on stays the same? So as if we need the European Union to be giving grants around different parts of Britain anyway. And they give a lot of grants to the media, so they get good publicity. So you're talking about people whose lives have been saved in South Wales by grants from the European Union, and they're the ones who voted most strongly to leave the Union. And that does suggest a deeply ingrained faithfulness, which no facts seem to penetrate. So this is another one of your strategies which I've mentioned even in this video now, that there's always something wrong with people who don't follow your agenda. So the people in South Wales who voted to leave the European Union, they didn't do it because they thought about the issues rationally and they thought it would be the best thing for whatever reason, having looked at the evidence, that Britain should leave the European Union. They didn't do it for that reason. They did it because they had deeply ingrained fearfulness, which no facts seem to penetrate. I wonder why you've chosen the word penetrate in light of the other things that you said during this lecture. But you haven't actually presented any facts, have you, Rowan? You just keep saying facts But saying facts doesn't make the things that you're saying a fact. You haven't presented any facts. You're just talking crap as usual. So you then say, so I think we're in for a very, very difficult few years politically across the globe. I tell you not for your comfort, as Chesterton said. I really don't think we can have any confidence that there will be a constructive political order in the world of the next few years. Well, it certainly won't be sane if you've got anything to do with it, will you? Because saying things are sane doesn't make you sane either. And saying the fact is and against all the facts and stuff like that doesn't mean that you're presenting any facts, because you're not actually presenting any facts at all, are you? It's just the usual impressionistic bullshit and maligning the people who don't agree with you and don't do what you want. And the simple fact is that you're a psychopath anyway. You're as mad as a hatter. You really are. And so you go on to say, and that emphatically doesn't mean that we sit back and wring our hands. We look for those forms of association, protest, alternative vision which we can make operate. We work very hard at the local level. We think very, very fundamentally about our educational philosophies and practices, but it's not going to be easy, and the narrative is very powerful there. So what you're saying is that we need to be indoctrinating people to accept the globalist point of view, and this is supposed to improve things for everybody, when actually, obviously, the real intention is exactly the opposite. And you're here again presenting yourself and your ideas as the voice of reason, the saviour, when the fact is that you're a globalist puppet. You're talking nothing but crap. And even though you keep referring to the facts in this question and answer session, you're not actually presenting any facts at all. You're just making crap up as usual. So anyway, I shall leave it there for this evening. Because I don't want to go on too long. And obviously I need to be going to sleep as soon as possible so I can be dreaming about my beloved, who's just so wonderful and handsome and sexy. And he's got such a sexy Welsh voice from North Wales. And of course there's those magnificent feet. And he's a brilliant theologian as well. He's nothing like you at all. Anyway, I will leave it there now. I'm getting carried away thinking about him. So I need to spend another long night in peaceful slumber, dreaming about my beloved, who I'm going to be with forever as soon as you're in prison. But I will be turning up to arrest you, so don't forget to be alert and let me know if you'd like me to kick you in the balls, because I'm still polishing my steel toe caps every day, and I'm eagerly waiting for your invitation. So, hasta la próxima.
We think very, very fundamentally about our educational philosophies and practices.
We don't need no education. We don't need no thought control.
Did everyone hear that question? Why is nationalism so popular? Why are the likes of Donald Trump so popular? If it is so unnatural, why is it taking off with such vehemence at the moment?
Being a little frivolous for a moment, I think we need another compendium word to describe the American and the European situation, and what I'd like to call the Brumpet phenomenon. That's the worldwide regression into self-regarding, angry, scapegoating mode. Well, we've had a very insecure few years. As a globe, apart from those parts of the world where it really is seriously a matter of daily threats to life, We've had terrorism combined with financial insecurity, the great financial crisis. We haven't actually got over that. A lot of people feel profoundly alienated from the so-called democratic process, and when you look at the American election, you can see why. The best democracy money can buy, as somebody once said. And a general sort of global sense of leadership alienated from citizenry and so forth. I'm not entirely surprised that people reach for the first thing on the peg, which is the comforting conviction it's their fault. And the they is the political class, the chattering class, the migrant, the banker, the welfare scrounger. You just scattergun. Blame going out in all directions from those who feel most alienated or left behind. And talking to somebody earlier this evening about the strange fact that in South Wales, my own home, an area which has benefited enormously from European grants over the years, whose life has been saved, you might say, by European grants, as one of the areas of the country that voted most strongly to leave the Union. And that does suggest a deeply ingrained fearfulness which no facts seem to penetrate. So I think we're in for a very, very difficult few years politically across the globe. I tell you naught for your comfort, as Chesterton said. I really don't think we can have any confidence that there will be a sane and constructive political order in the world in the next few years. And that emphatically doesn't mean that we sit back and wring our hands. We look for those forms of association, protest, alternative vision, which we can make operate. We work very hard at the local level. We think very, very fundamentally about our educational philosophies and practices. But it's not going to be easy. And the narrative is very powerful there. In the wake of nightmare events unfolding yet again in our continent, and I say our continent with full thought. Talking to somebody earlier this evening about the strange fact that in South Wales, my own home, an area which has benefited enormously from European grants over the years, whose life has been saved, you might say, by European grants, as one of the areas of the country that voted most strongly to leave the Union. And that does suggest a deeply ingrained fearfulness which no facts seem to penetrate.
You know the public will finish you. Is your brain really that miniature? You full of crap. Give yourself an...
Try to change me, you're wasting your time. Now I got something much better in mind. Robert De Niro's waiting, talking Italian.
This is why Catholics have the best sex.
Adelante.